it's Mark from the United States.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Mark from the States. How are we doing today? I am doing fantastic. I hope you are as well. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate each and every one of you. You know that I do. I'm just so happy that you're here with me today. Today we're going to be watching why the real reason, the actual reason, why London taxis are black. It's an iconic vehicle. Of course, every time we see it over here in the States, we automatically associate it with British culture and the UK and probably specifically London, I'm sure. This is a channel, Tom the taxi driver. I reached out to him. He was gracious enough to respond very quickly and give me his blessing to watch the video. Wonderful man. Please go and support his channel. I have seen some of his other videos. He is very good with his videos, and it's not just about the cab itself or the taxi. It's, he does a bunch of things. So you can certainly get lost on this channel for sure, watching a bunch of cool things. So please go support his channel. That is Tom the taxi driver. Of course, the link's going to be in the description. As always, that'll take you to this original video. I encourage you to go watch it first, then come back and then watch it with me, and you're able to then, of course, point out the things that I'm going to probably inevitably miss, or will go right over my head, or, something that I'm too American to see. So please come sit with me on this big fake couch. We have Violet over here. Leo is over there for those who care. And let's do it. Why are they black? And I assume he's going to talk about a bunch of other things as well. All right, let's do it.
Why is there no front seat in a London cab? Why are London taxis black? And why are we exempt from wearing a seatbelt? Well, we're going to learn all about it in this video.
Oh, cool.
Let's kick off with a big one. Why are London taxis black? Well, there's not actually a specific reason as to why this is the case. But the most likely answer is that this dates back to pre-war, when the majority of taxis were owned by proprietors. The only way of having a London taxi was to rent one from a garage, a bit like the New York system. But they opted for the colour black because they're much easier to repair if there's any damages or dings, much easier to hide a blemish in a black colour like this. Why do London taxis have this little side light? Well, it's a relic from where the meter actually used to be based here.
We're going to go back, but that totally makes sense. Of course, in New York, they're yellow. The yellow cab is such a synonymous with New York City. Other cities have yellow, but now you see them, even in New York, they're all different colors. Heck, in Vegas, they're all different shapes and sizes, and I mean, they're not even they used to be just that standard, whatever it was, vehicle. They all looked the same. They're all yellow. Now they're all different colors and different actual cars, actually different makes. Yeah. But I love the fact that these, and I'm sure London probably has other taxis, right, that are different than this. Maybe he'll talk about that, but this shape, the car itself, that, it's all iconic.
This little side light, well, it's a relic from where the meter actually used to be based here. Many years ago, the meter was like a little clockwork mechanism, and to activate it, you'd have to activate a flag right on this side of the taxi. It's only more modern meters that actually link to the light on top, and then of course turn the light off when it's not needed. So it's just another way of seeing if the cab's available, and a nod to the past of when the flag.
It's on the side that you're standing on the sidewalk there.
No. Taxi drivers are actually exempt from having to wear a seatbelt. This isn't just London cabbies, this is applicable all across the UK. Reason being is this. Imagine you're in like the Ford Mondeo, VW Passat kind of saloon that's common in most towns across the UK. Well, if you sat behind the driver, let me give you an example of what you could do. Yeah, very easily, this can become a weapon against...
That took a dark turn. Yeah, I never really even thought of that, but the partition that you have there, wouldn't that keep... Oh, well, he was referencing those other vehicles. Do those not have the center block partition thing? But yeah, gosh, I hadn't really thought of that. And I'm actually glad that I didn't think of that. For the people that instantly go right to that in their thought process, I wonder about you. But yeah, I didn't even think of using it as a weapon. Jesus.
It's the driver themselves. So it leaves the driver in quite a vulnerable position.
Absolutely.
Using the seatbelt. The same would happen on these taxis. People could reach inside of the partition, grab the belt, and of course, strangle the driver and say, "Oi, give me your money," or whatever. It still is one of the very few exemptions of not having to wear a seatbelt in the UK to this day.
I was thinking
so when
it
you're
allows
walking
you to
around
get
London,
out
you look at cab drivers
so
go by,
easily.
you'll often see them working without a seatbelt. It's also
I was thinking it's like in case someone tries to skip out on. This is where the first thing I think of. Someone's trying to skip out and not pay, and it allows you to get out real quick to chase them down.
also really handy as well if you need to quickly get out and help someone in or out of the taxi. I always try to minimize the amount of time that my cab is in a vulnerable position in terms of other road users. So anything that speeds up that process, such as not wearing a seatbelt, can really help. So what are these numbers in the front and the rear of every taxi window? Well, that's the driver's license number. So effectively, that is my number.
I am not a number. I am a man.
The cool thing with these numbers...
I know this. I know that reference. That's from that TV show. Is it The Prisoner? And it's from that. We did a video on it. And why I'm drawing a blank on the town. Port Marion? Is that what it's called? It's the Italian village. It's where the show was filmed.
Is they're actually sequential. So the lower the number, the older that number is. But it's not necessarily an indication of how long that driver has been driving for. In theory, yes. But over the years, if a driver loses their badge, I'm not wearing mine because I'm not at work yet, then that number has to be killed off. Because of course that badge can be taken on by someone and be used in fraudulent purposes. So you'll have seen this with YouTuber and cab driver Mark Monroe. He recently had his cab broken into, his badge was inside of his cab, and as a result, he had to get a brand new number. There is kind of a rough ruling for working out how old that number is. For instance, mine begins with a 78. I got my badge in the very end of 2017. So you know that most of the 78 badges are around 2017, 2018. Badges in the 50,000s are generally around 20 years or so. And as a general average, it was around 1,000 badges every year. That has slowed down a little bit because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's a fun thing to spot when you're out and about. Also, the colour of the badges. So, a green badge is an all-London licence. That means we can apply for hire everywhere in London. And a green badge driver is what you will see most times that you are within central London. You also have yellow badge drivers who do an in-depth knowledge test on a suburban area of London. These are generally the outer stretches of London. And often, their knowledge test will take just as long as a green badge driver like myself. But it's more concentrated to a particular area of London, such as Greenwich and Woolwich, or Morden or Sutton or Hounslow. All these other places around London that us green badge drivers never go.
So yeah, a knowledge test. I mean, I'm so used to taking Ubers where, you know, sometimes you're getting people who don't even live in the city. You're taking the Uber in, and they go there, or a fare or whatever, a ride had taken them there, and they're just going to hang out around town and grab some rides before they head out of town back to their hometown. You see that quite a bit, actually. And because you'll do small talk with them. Hey, were you from Ventura? And they're like, oh, no, I live in L.A. And they come all the way up to Ventura, which is, 40 miles or whatever. It takes like an hour or so time-wise to get here. But someone in LA needed to get to Ventura, and so they Ubered a ride up. And so now that he's up here, instead of just driving straight back, he picks up a couple rides up here to kind of make it worthwhile driving up here, I guess. But it doesn't matter because they have their phones that's on the maps and it tells them where to go, right? So I could see that. But being a taxi driver, you don't have that luxury of having a map, and it probably takes time and confusion of trying to put in the address of where you're going. You could just hop in and say, take me here, I need to go here, and they know exactly where to go. So yeah, but it's something that you don't really I just assume you're a taxi driver and you've lived in that city forever, you already know where to go. There wasn't really some sort of knowledge test or anything like that to see if you do actually know where to go. Interesting. Crazy.
So if that's the driver's license, what's this one? Well, this is the vehicle license. We get a new number every year when we take this taxi for what's called an overhaul. Basically, a conditions of fitness by Transport for London. They inspect the whole condition of the taxi, and if it's good to go, if it's able to be licensed for another year, they'll award one of these plates here. These again are also sequential, but it's less of an important number because it just gets changed every year. You'll also find that inside of the taxi, there's a few other things on here as well, such as when this plate expires and how many passengers this vehicle is allowed. This plate is independent.
That thing holds 6 people?
Of the driver. So this is to do with just the vehicle itself. I could keep this plate on and loads of people could drive this taxi. It's not related to this cab at all. Whereas in the window, that is my unique number. What about credit card systems? Well, depends on the cab, who owns the cab, etc. To begin with, there's a whole list that Transport for London provide of approved suppliers of credit card systems. And there's reasons for this. They want it to be a uniform kind of design inside of all of the taxis, the ability to be able to have a printed receipt, and also if the passenger has any problems with the payment or if they get double charged, something like that, they can contact that payment provider, usually through their statement. It will have the driver's number in there as well as part of the statement. It's all about having like an approachable system, I guess. However, each one of these systems is different, both in terms of the commission they take, how they pay you, and how you actually use the system. For example, when I first rented a taxi, they had a system called CMT, and it worked very, very well for people with lots of taxis or fleets that rent out taxis to other people. Because what you then get is you have a screen up front, you log in using your unique username and PIN, and all of your bank details are associated with that login and PIN. So, customer in the back pays for the cab, that gets sent on to this third-party company, i.e. CMT. They then take their fee out of it before paying it on to the driver. And it depends on the provider as to how quickly they pay you, what percentage they take, etc. I'm with this company called Viva Wallet, and it's quite a good system. I get paid next day, irregardless. It's a relatively good percentage fee. What it does, though, is that it pays me next day onto a business debit card. And I can use that for my fuel, for anything really, booking holidays, whatever. The incentive of using that card is it actually gives me cash back against the fees that they take. It's kind of a clever system in that.
So it covers your fees
that way. Some fees associated with it, and I can transfer it into any other bank account if I wish to. But that's just one of their ways of doing it. So all of the credit card systems have their ups and downs. Some are really reliable, some are absolute crap. But you go through them, see what works best for you, and it's highly individualized to the driver or the fleet that rents the taxi. Credit card systems are also super good because you just have all of your statements there when it comes to the end of the tax year and you go to your accountant, you can just go, there you go, there's all my credit card statements. It's not a mess of having to try and collate everything all together. Most of them have pretty good reporting procedures that just make it so much less of a headache. So, speaking of cool features that are unique to every London taxi is this partition screen here. Now, a lot of people think it's because of COVID-19. Wasn't for that, we've had it forever. Some people think it's for driver safety, and yes, that is another reason.
That's instantly what I would think of.
One of the main reasons is that we've just kind of always had some kind of partition with the passenger. Think about the old school Hackney cabs where the driver would be on the roof and the passengers would have their own separate segregated compartment. Travelling in taxis used to be something that only the upper class and really wealthy people could do. So if you're a taxi driver, you're obviously like a working class schmuck. You're the one who's up there subjected to the wind, the rain, the cold. The upper class people would have their own private cabriolet, this kind of space that we have here. It's where the terminology cab comes from cabriolet. And as a result, they had their own private space. Another way of looking at it is Victorian Britain. Take a pub, for example.
Love those old shots.
I think it's only recently that the Hollybush pub in Hampstead, it was one of the last pubs that had a snob screen. And a way of looking at a snob screen, it's a bit like those COVID barriers that everyone put up during the pandemic, right? Well, the Victorians did this, but they had a piece of translucent glass. The idea being is that the person buying the drink would not want to make eye contact with the server or the bartender because they're likely to be someone of working class background.
Oh my gosh.
Look at someone of working class nature. And it was that separation of classes across society. And that's pretty much the same as it is in cabs.
I gotta be honest, I'm thinking they need to bring those back. Not because of any sort of class structure or anything like that, but sometimes you go somewhere and you just don't want to look at somebody. Like when you're ordering a coffee from Starbucks, or you're up at a fast food place, and you or even paying something somewhere. I don't know. Doesn't matter where you are. I kind of like that idea. I'm thinking we should bring those back.
That's why we have this divide. It's like, I'm just the working class driver in the front. This bit in the back is for the passenger. And it's still kind of that way now. It just entitles into a sense of privacy.
Sorry to keep pausing. I'm pausing a lot here. I apologize. But this now answers my question, or my thought of 6 people. No idea that the seats folded down. I was kind of thinking, how do they fit 6 people in the back there, especially when he showed us that there's no front passenger seat. It's like, how are you fitting 6? But of course, yes, folding seats, 3 face backwards. Of course.
And it's one of those things that just makes a black cab so exclusive that you have this private space all to yourself, undeterred by the driver, because they're just up front doing their job. Even features like the intercom, which you can turn on and off to interact with the driver. Just gives you that little bit more cool driver. So why is there no front seat? Well, we've never really had one. You do have a boot on these cabs, but there's not really much space in them for luggage and stuff.
No.
Think about the open portion of an old double-decker bus where people would hop on and off at the back. This was kind of a similar thing. When you'd hail down a cab, you would chuck your briefcase on this front open portion, so the driver would kind of be exposed here, and you would hop in the back. You wouldn't have your briefcase on you. There's drivers who do have these classic models of taxi, and they still have just like a stack of briefcases there because it looks like a nice feature. But that's how the luggage was always done. I have seen this cab, the TXE, with a flip seat here, but I don't think it was a licensed London cab. Because we've got to store the disabled harnesses underneath this foot bit here, even if I did get a good position to put a seat in, I don't think it's going to fit.
I could fit.
You'd have to do away with this storage
Tom's a lot taller
disabled harnesses, because you need the disabled harnesses as conditions of fitness of being a London taxi driver or a London vehicle. I don't think you're going to be getting a seat in the front of one of these. So it'll forever be the luggage compartment. So why do London taxis have this super tight turning circle of being able to do a U-turn within 25 feet? First off, it's actually a condition of the vehicle being licensed. So if you said, look, I want to make a brand new taxi for the London market, it must have this turning circle of some kind. Of course, the Mercedes Vito has a rear wheel steer, so they actually turn the rear wheels to ensure it still complies with that same turning circle requirement.
So they do have
the Greater London Authority, or
for larger
GLA,
parties,
basically says that the turning circle requirement ensures that London taxis can manoeuvre pretty efficiently without causing congestion within the capital. But if that was the case, why do we bother having that restriction on 18,000 taxis, but not on the 100,000 plus private hire vehicles, which have to do that pretty inefficient U-turn.
That makes sense.
I love it, and it does make a massive difference in the efficiency of being able to just turn around, pick someone up, and away you go. So, mixed opinions of the turn in circle requirement, because obviously to put that in is a highly specialised and specific feature to these taxis, which invariably costs money, puts the price of the vehicle up. So would you want to do away with the turn in circle requirement and then have a cheaper vehicle? I don't know necessarily. It's hard to say. There are other reasons, supposedly, for the turn in circle.
Oh, no.
I once heard it's because of the tight turn in circle at the Savoy Hotel, and obviously taxis dropping off there quite frequently. Another story I heard was that one of the original manufacturers of London taxis was actually based in France. And when they brought them over on the ferry, the taxis didn't actually have a reverse gear. So by putting a very tight turning circle on them, it allowed them to do a U-turn on the boat so they could just drive off in the correct direction. Mad, really. That might be one of those legend hazards.
I don't believe it.
It's one of those things that's highly specialised for this cab, just like the disability requirements. London taxis are 100% disabled accessible. What do I mean by that? Well,
that's cool.
Every single taxi you see in the street will have the same features that mean if you're disabled or have some sort of mobility impairment, you're going to be able to get some kind of accommodation for that. Let's have a little look at some of these features. This one is a disabled ramp.
Yes.
Pretty easy disabled ramp.
Yes.
Which also transforms into a step. This is awesome. Obviously we've got the curb, so that's a little bit redundant, but if you haven't got a curb, you're gonna stand on that and away you go.
That is ingenious.
Super high visibility grab handles. Fixing points for wheelchairs, and even a super cool swivel seat.
Wow. I love it.
That's cool. So
yeah, it is
you might be
cool.
wondering, no luggage and no bale of hay in the boot either. This is one of those ones that did apparently exist at one point,
for
but
horses?
has now been since repealed. And that is that every London cabbie has to carry a bale of hay in the boot, of course, to feed the horse that would be pulling the carriage. The reason being for this was that they had to be supplied with their own hay and not being fed from the street, so from the taxi itself. That's why it was kept in the boot. And apparently this hadn't been repealed until the 1980s, which of course saw combustion vehicles on the streets. So it's no longer a requirement for
It'd be great if they still had to carry some hay back
But
there.
semi-related to that is the distance of the knowledge. Why is it a 6-mile radius of Charing Cross? Now, when we do the knowledge of London, we have to learn every street point of interest within a 6-mile radius of King Charles I Island, or thereabouts Charing Cross Station. Now, I understand this because King Charles I Island is generally where all the distances are measured to. So whenever you see a street sign saying London 1 mile that way or London 10 miles that way, they're measuring it to King Charles I Island, which is a very small roundabout just below Trafalgar Square. But what about the outward distance? Why 6 miles? Because London's much bigger than that, right? Well, some people think it's because of the fact that 6 miles is as far as you could go with a horse without having to stop and refuel. It's not that reason at all. It's actually because it was just the metropolitan boundary of London at the time. You've got to remember that the knowledge was instigated in 1851. Much smaller and more condensed place at that time. And then as it evolved through the years, it was controlled by the Metropolitan Police. But even though the radius area is 6 miles, we're not allowed to refuse a job until it goes much more than that. Yes, currently as it stands, we can only refuse a job if it's longer than 12 miles from where it originates from, or 18 miles if it's at Heathrow. The journey is expected to take greater than 1 hour, or the passenger is drunk and disorderly or may have no means of paying for the fare. I believe this was changed within Ken Livingstone, so it would have once been 6 miles, much like the knowledge radius, but of course to stop drivers refusing those fares, they went to 12 miles instead. Because think about it, if I'm an hour west out of town and this job takes me an hour east, well, I'm 2 hours from home. If I've already done a long shift in the cab, that's obviously not safe driving conditions. So,
and you're wasting wasting time not getting any money. I mean, you're not able to get, let's say you're not going back home, but you're still driving an hour out of your main area that you work in, right? So generally, if you're going to be driving out of London, it's not going to be as populated. There's not going to be as many opportunities to get a job. A fare is what we'd call it. And you would just have to drive, spend that time you would normally be making money. You were doing it on your own dime, essentially, driving back into London to resume getting jobs. I mean, that makes total sense. Get an Uber if you want to go out of the city. That's how I look at that.
If I was unable to refuse any job, then what? Where do you draw the line? Well, let's go to Manchester. Let's go down to Liverpool. Who knows? Which brings me on to another compelling point. Why would a cab driver want to refuse a job anyway? It's money, right? If I want to make the most amount of money possible, all I've got to do is just spend the most amount of time in this taxi. But there's some limitations. Obviously, I'm going to need to sleep at some point. I might want to have a social life, whatever. It then comes down to efficiency. When I'm in town, I want to ensure that I am the most profitable I can be. And how can I be the most profitable? Well, always having a job on. So the old saying is, sorry mate, I don't go South London, or I don't go over the river. Depending on the individual driver's biases, it could be anywhere in London, because what works for one driver might not work for another driver. But the main reason being is, if it's really busy in town, and I get dragged down to Peckham, Greenwich or beyond, highly unlikely I'm going to pick up off the street. So it's not an efficient job. It might pay well to get out there, but it's only as good as me coming back in and getting onto the next job. My ethos in the cab is, where's my next job? Where's my next job? It's kind of like wanting to get a fix. It's like, where's the next place? So it's the kind of practice that did happen quite a bit in the past. Thankfully, it happens less now because these jobs are quite nice to get and you can't always guarantee how busy it's going to be. This was also, pre-private hire, pre-Uber, when drivers could pick and choose a lot more. There was a little bit more of a monopoly. Speaking of being efficient with your time and money, there's another way that taxi drivers can earn money. Taxi advertising is probably one of our most commonly asked questions on this channel, and I will do a bit more of a deep dive into this. But of course, taxi drivers can earn money by putting adverts in their taxi and around their taxi. It works multiple ways, but generally goes like this. There's a few individual companies across London, such as Ubiquitous Media, Cabby Media, Sherbet London, there's loads of them, that basically get marketing from an agency. So let's just say Boohoo wants to do a new campaign.
No. It's not black anymore. Boo-hoo. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's still very noticeable, but come on. Oh gosh. Hopefully they pay a lot though. Hopefully you get paid a lot to transform your cab into the iconic black one, into these, whatever you call it. Boo-hoo.
They reach out to these cab companies and say, right, 100 cabs, it's going to cost this amount. Obviously, they'll charge a price. They then, have to put in their materials, labour costs, etc., and then pass a little bit of that on to the driver. Different companies structure it differently, and also it depends whether the driver owns their cab or if they rent that taxi. As an example, when I rented from a garage in North London, they said, look, Tom, you're currently renting from us. Do you want to put some adverts on the side of your cab? And in return, you'll get 1 week's rent free for the entire year. So you're like, okay, I was renting about, £250 a week, I think? I drive the cab anyway, so it's not a bad idea. Now, obviously, the company that's applying to the cabs probably earns the most. Then the proprietor earns a bit, and then it comes down to the cabbie that probably earns the least. If I own my own cab, then prices can vary between £1,000 to up to £4,000, depending on the supplier, depending on what you get, etc. So the most common you'll see in London is something called super sides, and they are literally just liveries that run along the side of cabs because they're super easy to pull off, reapply, and change at a moment's notice. You also get the full wraps which go around the taxi. Of course, these pay a lot more because there's a lot more advertising real estate going on. There's also other incentives as well. So let's just say a flagship retail store opens on Regent Street. They get 5 cabs liveried up saying we've got a brand new store opening. What they might also do is say, look, we want those 5 cabs directly outside of our retail store when it opens. And they'll pay the driver a day rate for that. You know, it all comes down to the individual company and what they can offer, because obviously offering their product is going to be much cheaper than them offering hard cash. So
yeah, the advertising, I'm glad they're not putting it on top of the roof like they do like in Vegas and New York, and I'm sure many other cities. I think LA does it as well. They have those ungodly, ugly looking signs on top attached to the roof of the vehicle. And so you're advertising everything from strip clubs to restaurants to nightclubs to whatever. And it just looks awful. It does. But with that said, it really makes them noticeable if you need to get a cab. Now, like say in Vegas, the hailing, you don't really hail a cab in Vegas because they are all just lined up at all the hotels. Now, maybe you do downtown more because it's downtown Vegas, that is. Here in Ventura, everybody Ubers, but they do have cabs, and you call them essentially. You're calling them up. They may have it, an app you can use too. I'm not sure, but I haven't called a cab in God knows how long. We took cabs when we were in Vegas, and those are easy because every hotel you go, you walk out and they're all lined up, and the guy will call it up for you, and away you go, and you just go from one hotel to the next or whatever. Very, very easy, but the advertising is awful. I hate it. This looks better. The wraps, I don't know about the full wrap because you're taking away from the actual vehicle itself, but yeah, I mean, if it pays well and you've got a good gig, then yeah, I would do it probably for sure.
Have I got any adverts on my cab? Will I get adverts on my cab? And no. There's a few reasons for it though. First off is the faff of going in and get it changed. Now, truth be told, and especially the super sides, they are stupidly quick at getting fitted. In fact, I want to make a video that shows you how it works, because it is literally like that bit in Grand Theft Auto, the video game, where you drive into the garage and it resprays in an instant and you come back in. There's about 10 guys all around the cab just ripping off the old one, putting the new one on, and you drive out the other end of the garage. It's ridiculously good. But I've got to factor in my time to get to the garage to do that. It might not be at the most convenient time for me to do it, and so forth. Secondly, you don't necessarily have control over what goes on your cab. So, could be an advert for Durex one week, could be Andrex the week after. Who knows?
No way.
And lastly, I do tours and private work. So, if I turn up with a particular advert on the cab, it just doesn't look as clean and presentable as a plain black cab. A taxi that can ply for hire from the street and have the word taxi on it is also known as a Hackney Carriage, a publicly hireable vehicle. But whereabouts in Hackney does the Hackney Carriage come from? Trick question, I'm afraid. It has nothing to do with the area of East London called Hackney. In fact, it actually comes from a particular breed of horse called a Hackney. It's actually a French or Belgian breed of horse that was bred specifically for its low trot step pattern, which basically meant that when it was pulling passenger coaches, it's a much more smoother, more pleasant ride. So nothing to do with Hackney, all to do with the type of horse. Is it illegal to hail a taxi? Well, I've heard of Americans come up with this one.
What?
And in fact, sometimes the first time you ever interact with an American, if they've only just visited London, is that they'll look at you quite confusingly, like they want to stick their arm out, but they're sort of almost like trapped. They're like, they can't do it. And it's because they have this notion that it is illegal to hail
I've never
taxi.
heard that.
Well, where's this come from? What's it all about? Well, in the literature, apparently it is illegal to shout taxi because that could distract a driver. If you say taxi and a driver's driving away or looking somewhere else, he might look quite quickly, and then of course problems apparently. You know, I don't mind if someone shouts. If I'm there looking at the near side where the majority of my hails come from and there's someone on the offside, arm out, and just wants to do something a little bit extra to get my attention, then, you know, go for it. I'm sure you're not going to be...
That person's got to get over on the side of the street he's going.
In terms of physically hailing one from the street, putting the arm up, well, I guess in a lot of other places, particularly in the UK and around the world, you always get one from the stand, right? From the taxi rank itself. And that was the way that taxis first came into existence in London. In the 17th century, it was Captain Bailey who first instigated the idea of a taxi rank, a section of taxis that could be parked up there, ready for anyone to come along and grab a cab. You wasn't always able to hail them in this way. When concierges were looking for taxis, they used to use a whistle. And this used to be so rife in like Westminster, you know, you're talking in the Victorian times, where the concierges would just be constantly whistling for cabs, just whistle, no cab, let's whistle again. And you can imagine how bad that would be, just all these whistles going off everywhere, and such a nuisance to the public. So I think that practice then got outlawed. But in terms of hailing a taxi, nah, put that arm up, loud and proud, let the driver know that you want one of the world's finest. So it might not be illegal to hail a taxi, but it is against the law to do something with the word taxi. So it's actually the word itself, taxi, that is enshrined in law, in the same way that a security guard can't pose as a police officer.
Yeah.
But why is this distinction so important?
Makes sense.
Well, a taxi, i.e. a vehicle that is fitted with a taxi meter, is for public hire. It is able to apply for hire from the street, as opposed to private hire, which has to be pre-booked in advance. This is quite an important distinction for passengers to know when they're getting in, because that then assumes the trustworthiness of the driver, certain DBS, CRB conditions, etc. So people try and interchangeably use this. You know, go on the Uber website, you won't see the word taxi mentioned there unless it is actually referring to a taxi, not one of their own vehicles. They'll use it quite sneakily within marketing and SEO online. They'll use the word taxi to bump themselves up in the listings, but they can't say that their own private hire fleet are taxi, because that is enshrined in law. It goes one step further in that in journalism, they can't use the word taxi if they're trying to refer to a private hire vehicle. So for example, there's an article, which I'll link down below, of a private hire driver who was convicted of rape and sexual assault of a passenger. The journalistic article are so careful in their wording to not use the word taxi. They want to use the word taxi because they know that will perfectly sum up exactly what they're trying to say. But it's not allowed because that refers to a different distinction of job entirely. The wording they use is actually, it says, predatory private cab driver. But interestingly, the URL says cab driver, but they can't use the word taxi. Same goes with putting it on the vehicle. You can't just go, you know what, I'm going to advertise my vehicle as a taxi. So it's not fitted with a taxi meter or licensed by the local authority as a publicly hired vehicle, then it is not a taxi.
Perfect sense.
Why does the taxi meter start at £3.80? Well, have a think about it. If you hired me on the street and the taxi meter started at 0, and you said, driver, I only want to go down the end of the street there, well, the fare might be 40p or 60p. So we get to the end of the street, it's 60p. Firstly, I'd probably be like, well, 60p, like, so what? I'll probably just let them out and go, fine. But look at the real logistics of that. They've had to hail me down, we've had to have a brief conversation, they've had to get in the back, put their seatbelt on, make sure they're all ready. If they've got kids or if they've got a few items, they've got to get that all set and in place. Then we've got to drive to the end of the road. I've then got to stop the meter. They've got to get out of the taxi, then go, where's your card machine? Oh, okay, it's in the back. Card machine takes its fee, and so on. So what might only seem like, I don't know, a 15-second job, a 20-second job down the end of the street, might have taken 5 minutes all in. And those 5 minutes really add up. And that 60p is no longer really 60p. It's different all across the UK. And in fact, London's quite generous at £3.80. Many start around the £5 mark. I think even with Uber, the minimum fare you can get within Uber is about £5. So it's really generous by comparison. And then from there, it goes up in 20p increments. The other thing with this taxi meter is that it's the only part of the vehicle that I do not own. I have to rent that. And that's the case for London anyway. I know that other districts and areas of the UK, they can buy the meter, and then presumably they pay for the updates as they go. which is not the way it's done in London.
Yeah,
so that gets
I would
updated
imagine
once
it's
a
heavily
year,
regulated.
and that tariff is set by Transport for London. So I have no control
you can't
over
manipulate
the price that displays. That's all set by our governing body, which is Transport for London. It's sealed, and that's what these little indicators here mean. And this particular tariff is green. So this just lets me know that this is the most up-to-date tariff. They just change it every year, so it'll be color-coded, red, blue, whatever. In meter terms, the prices generally always go up. So therefore, I want it to be the most recent tariff. And I know that because of this green light here. You'll see it in other cabs around London if you ever get in a cab, what these different lights are. As of August 2023, in place from April 2023, it's a green light. If you get in another cab and it's a different color, you've got yourself a parking. If you want to learn more about how I update my meter, I actually have a separate video about that over here as well. And then finally, the other thing you have here is this number. It's number 1. That means we're in tariff 1, which is the lowest of the 3 sort of 4 tariffs that we have. Number 1 is basically daytime tariff. Number 2 is your weekends, and between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. just goes up a little bit more, always starts at £3.80. And tariff 3 is after 10 o'clock. That's your nighttime rate or your bank holiday rate. You sometimes get extras on New Year's. Check out my New Year's video if you want to see how that tariff works and the extras that I get on top of that. That's applied automatically. The other thing we can do is add extras if we start at Heathrow Airport. £3.60. Why? Because that's how much it costs for me to go through the feeder park, so that just gets passed back on to the customer.
Very cool.
So that's all the stuff you never knew about a London taxi. If you want to learn a little bit more about how much this vehicle costs and how much it costs for me to be a London taxi driver, that'll all be in this video over here.
Please go and support Tom and his channel. I apologize for all my pausing. So much to take in there. Who knew all this crazy stuff? So informative. Now I'm going to get in a cab 2025 with my wife, and I'm going to start spouting off all these things about the cab. She's going, yeah, but what about what we're looking out the window at? This is great that you have all this knowledge about a cab, the taxi we're in, but she's going to probably leave me in the taxi and say, I'm going to go, see the Tower or Buckingham or Westminster or whatever, and I'm going to be going, but this cab is awesome. Oh, gosh. Awesome. Thank you, Tom. Please, again, go support his channel. Link to his video will be in the description, as always. And I hope everybody's happy, healthy, and safe. He's just really good. He's just good in front of the camera, which makes it very enjoyable. Have a great day, everyone, and we will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.
Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark. Yeah.